This is Alyssa. I don't know her last name, but I know her first name is Alyssa, and her YouTube channel is Final Facts with Alyssa. Now that we've established her name is Alyssa, I never intended to do a YouTube video on this, or including her, but I came across a video where she was debating another YouTuber, so I got curious as to some of the things that she believes in, and I checked out her YouTube channel, and this was the first video I clicked on. And I do want to make it a point that my videos are not intended to bash people or humiliate them, and though I can control my mouth, I can't control their feelings. So they may just feel bashed and humiliated no matter what. But the point of my videos is to check the facts. Hence the name, Check the Facts. And after clicking this video, I only had to hear the first point she made, and I knew I had something good coming, because I listened to all her points, and I concluded that she only skimmed the surface, as most people do. You know, you hear some things in the media, and you are able to quickly print out some things and say some stuff, and there you go, you have a video. I will say I am extremely jealous at the timing of her videos, because it can take me up to a full week getting up 7 or 8 in the morning and all the way till 9 or 10 at night straight to do all my digging and put together one video. But I suppose it's okay because I have these videos done in advance, so I can release them 1 or 2 every other day. But that's beside the point. Alyssa, anyone can skim the surface and say the things that you said, but did you bother to dig just a little bit deeper, even a little or a lot? Because after listening to this video, I believe that this girl, Alyssa, is dead set in her ways and is not very open to hearing anything else. And though I am not a Democrat, I will absolutely admit when the Republicans are wrong too, because if someone is guilty of something, it doesn't matter what side you're on, you call it out.
Hello friends! It's Alyssa back at you with some final facts. We're going to be going 2 for 2 this week, guys, because we have really got to address this Kavanaugh madness.
It's Kavanaugh, not Kavanaugh.
So let's get started. I am making this video specifically for everyone on the right and for all the Republicans, for anybody right now who is doubting survivors, who is trying to silence survivors, who still supports Kavanaugh in the wake of these sexual assault allegations. As you guys may well know, we just got our 3rd accuser today. That's right, we've got Dr. Ford, we've got Deborah Ramirez, and now we've got Julie Swetnick, in case you guys haven't looked into that.
But how unfortunate for you, I did look into them, all 3 of them, and I read, and I read, and I read. I read statements, I read comments, I read all the grilling. And anyone who has ever seen or read the details of a trial would know that those people will ask you the strangest questions. They will dissect your life. They will ask you everything and probably including your DNA. They are so thorough. Being on trial, being questioned, it's a very scary thing. But I looked into all 3 of them, Swetnick's being the most hazy of them all, Ford being the most detailed, and Ramirez somewhere in between. There are discrepancies. But I will say this, both sides are equally lying and both sides are equally telling the truth in some way. And because we as humans are prone to lying, denying, and exaggerating, it's sad to say that we will never truly know everything that has happened. Because after reading those reports, all 4 of them, Kavanaugh included, are guilty of something. There are definitely exaggerations, but someone is lying. In fact, I think more than one person is. Because one of them says, you're guilty, the other one says, no, I'm not, you're guilty of something, and back and forth and back and forth.
So yeah. So what I want to do today is talk about, let's take the sexual assault allegations and I'm going to put them to the side. Because, again, Republicans, they don't care about survivors. They don't care about people who get raped. They don't care about any of that. So I'm going to take all that to the side. And today I'm going to give you guys a 5-minute fact check on why Kavanaugh is completely against the American principles of liberty and justice for all. And why, if you support Kavanaugh as an American, you are absolutely against the idea of liberty and justice for all. So let's go ahead and break down all of the different groups of Americans who would be seriously harmed and who are going to be at high risk of being seriously harmed if someone like Kavanaugh takes this position on the Supreme Court. So let's get started. Let's talk about the disabled. I don't know if you guys know this, but Kavanaugh actually ruled against the Department of Disability Services call to action that essentially gave those who are mentally disabled control over their own bodies. It basically said that this proposition said that if you are mentally disabled, somebody could not just take you and perform a medical procedure or surgery on you without your permission or without your permission, excuse me. And Kavanaugh voted against this.
See, now, it's the way that she's putting it out there that's making it seem like it's the worst thing ever. Again, she only skimmed the surface but didn't bother to do some research or ask why questions. So while she takes a breath because she clearly forgot to breathe, I'll explain this better to you. Okay, she's definitely twisting some things around to make them sound not what they seem. So let me just clarify what she is not saying correctly. Here's the overview of the call to action. It's based on this principle. Good health is necessary for persons with disabilities to have the freedom to work, learn, and engage actively in their families and their communities. And you can pause this video and read the goals for yourselves if you want. What Alyssa is confusing this with is a case that happened in Washington where a patient was unable to make decisions because of complete mental impairment, was given treatment according to the wishes he or she would have wanted. In this article, it says laws like the one in Washington, D.C. are used to help ascertain what a patient would have wanted when they were competent to make a medical decision. The courts usually consider the patient's expressed wishes as an important factor in making that determination. But what this guy in the article notes is that Kavanaugh concluded that people's expressed wishes should be given no way at all if they never had the capacity to make medical decisions, calling the issue of bodily autonomy, especially for people with disabilities, into question. But in a sense, he is not wrong. And before you all get mad and puff up like marshmallows, listen to why. If you're in the medical field, you will absolutely understand this better. If you're not, here's the explanation. Kavanaugh isn't just going to make a stupid comment like that. He is a public figure, and he can easily lose his position, because people with disabilities is a serious matter, and they are very much given consideration in this country, including the medical field. What he said applies to people who are completely mentally disabled. That means they cannot function, they cannot speak right, they have no idea where they are, they have no orientation, they don't know their name, they cannot do anything mentally, they are vegetables even. For example, someone who is in a vegetative state, or someone who is in a coma, someone who is in the final stages of Alzheimer's. These are the special cases. Here are two scenarios that happen in a hospital. The most obvious one, let's say someone has been in an accident, they are taken to the ER, and they have not been identified yet. Something must be done immediately because they are going to die. So the hospital staff will do what they deem appropriate to save the person's life. They will not ask consent because they have none. The person cannot talk. The person is out like a light. The staff must act quickly. That person, for all intents and purposes, is disabled, but a decision must be made, and it will be by the staff until someone can be contacted if the patient has next of kin, like a husband or wife, spouse, child, parent. But until then, that decision is made by the staff. But putting aside the obvious one, here's the one that is not so well known by a lot of people, including Alyssa, the YouTuber. Someone with the medical conditions I just mentioned earlier, coma, Alzheimer's, or vegetative state, they cannot make a decision. So the staff must make that decision on their behalf in order to save the patient, keep them alive and well. It is all for the patient's well-being, unless the patient has beforehand consented to something or signed a DNR or already expressed his or her wishes before they fell into this vegetative state or coma or Alzheimer's or something else. If the person or patient has been like this all their life, there is usually a proxy who takes care of everything, like a parent or a child. There is durable power of attorney. If the patient never had advance directives because the patient was mentally impaired all their life, legally the next of kin will make that decision. But what if there is no next of kin, like parent or brother or sister or aunt or someone? It could be someone close to the patient. But let's say there is no one close to the patient, there is no family, there is no friend, there is no one. Let's say they all just, suddenly vanished and are nowhere to be found. This patient who cannot think, speak, do anything for him or herself, be independent at all, is completely dependent on care, will have that care done by the staff, will have the decisions made by the staff. Let's be logical here. What are you going to do to someone who is in a vegetative state? You're going to go up to the patient's bed and say, "Hey, get up. I have to talk to you. What do you want? Get up. Come on. Are you going to slap the patient around and tell him to wake up? No. This is so dumb. You have to be logical. The patient must be taken care of. Someone must take care of that patient. There's no one to give any consent, so the staff must take over. It is something you learn in nursing school. It is something you learn in medical school. It is something that you know well in the hospital. I've worked with dementia patients before, and yes, you do ask them what they want to wear. You give them an option between choice A or choice B. You want to help them be oriented if they're in the early stages. They absolutely have an input. Or what if you had a psych patient with depression and a mental disorder who suddenly went from a good mood to wanting to strangle you? The staff is now in control because that patient is a safety risk to him or herself and everyone else around. That patient is now going to be taken to a seclusion room, and on the way the patient keeps yelling, "I want to talk to my wife. I want to talk to my wife." And yells a whole bunch of other stuff. But guess what? That patient just lost the privileges of doing anything for himself because he's having a breakdown and he is a safety risk. And this happens in psych wards. Don't think this is uncommon. You see a lot of weird things at hospitals. A lot of crazy things and a lot of sad things. It's the way that Alyssa is saying it and wording it, and the way that news articles are wording this, that is making Kavanaugh look like the bad guy when actually he has a point. You must be completely 100% incapable of making a decision for the hospital staff to make that decision for you, or you must be completely impaired without a proxy. If you don't have a proxy, if you don't have a family member to make that decision for you, it will be made by the staff. That's why he said that. Do you all remember the case of Terry Schiavo? She could not speak, she could not communicate, she could not understand, she could not think. She was on a feeding tube. She was on everything imaginable because she was not fully functioning. The people who made a decision in her place was her family. And unfortunately, that went south because of her husband. Shame on him. Look at these books. These are the mega Bibles of nursing. These are 2 of 13 similar books I have and read through. I even took it a step further. I measured it just for you so you can see how thick it is. It falls over 2 inches in thickness. It weighs about 1,000,000 pounds, so you can easily break down a wall with it. Lucky for me, I also had digital versions of them. This book teaches the fundamentals of nursing, hence the name, The Fundamentals of Nursing. This is the most basic, smallest scratch on the surface, and this book is over 2 inches too. Look what it says in this chapter. Healthcare proxies or durable power of attorney for healthcare. A healthcare proxy or durable power of attorney for healthcare is a legal document that designates a person or people of one's choosing to make healthcare decisions when a patient is no longer able to make decisions on his or her own behalf. This agent makes healthcare treatment decisions on the basis of the patient's wishes. In addition to federal statutes, the ethical doctrine of autonomy ensures the patient has the right to refuse medical treatment. This means that if the patient wants a DNR, they can have a DNR, which means you must let the patient die if the pulse stops or the heart stops. Although the courts will not force adults to undergo treatment refused for religious reasons, they will grant an order allowing hospitals and healthcare providers to treat children of abusive or negligent parents or groups who have denied consent for treatment of their minor children for religious reasons. Like Jehovah's Witness, they do not believe in blood transfusions, but if a child comes to the hospital and the diagnosis is severe and the child needs a blood transfusion, the hospital, the doctor can overrule and do the transfusion regardless. Did you catch that? They can overrule because the adult or parent is not treating the child properly. Let's keep reading. This is based on the legal doctrines of parens patriae, in which the state or government makes decisions on behalf of those who are unable to make decisions for themselves. This is where many of you who have shocked faces need to pause this video and read that last line over and over and over again until you get it. Tarlow versus District of Columbia was one of the cases that Kavanaugh was accused of not supporting people with disabilities to make decisions for themselves. It says here the District of Columbia's Healthcare Decisions Act provides that any individual, including persons who have been determined to be intellectually disabled, shall be presumed capable of making healthcare decisions unless certified otherwise. Looking at the next paragraph, it says mental incapacity to make a healthcare decision shall not be inferred from the fact that the individual is mentally retarded. It means that if the patient has an impairment, that patient could still make a decision, but for that patient to not make a decision, that patient would have to be completely, totally incapable. So no one is taking away their ability to make any decisions. It's just those people who absolutely cannot, because what are they going to do? There are people who literally sit in their chairs or beds and drool. They stare off into space. They are glassy-eyed because they cannot do anything. They're, for all intents and purposes, vegetables. So what are they going to do? What are you going to do? Are you going to demand that person start speaking and telling everyone what he or she wants? No, that is so stupid. Kavanaugh is a public figure. He's not going to do something dumb to discredit himself or to take himself off of this position. You will find medical situations like this everywhere in the US, and these decisions will be made. I urge you guys to read through Tarlow versus DC because it explains everything, and it also says that these 3 patients never had the mental capacity to make decisions for themselves or understand medical necessities. It says it more than once that they were never capable to make their own decisions. This would be so completely different if these 3 actually did have the capacity to make a decision of some sort, because then yes, he would have violated something, and he'd be in big trouble. He for sure would not be a representative or a judge any longer.
He voted against this. Not only that, Kavanaugh has voted time and time again in favor of businesses over the disabled. Essentially, he's voted for things that would give businesses the legal right to discriminate against employees who are disabled or discriminate against potential employees who are disabled.
This article does say that Kavanaugh is for businesses, but I wanted to find out what was going on with this, because as usual, something is amiss. This article says that after the ADA Amendment Act of 2008 was made, it was shockingly followed by the ADA Education and Reform Act of 2017. So something must have happened in order for this act to be passed. The ADA Amendment Act of 2008 generalizes disabilities. It is a very broad area. And yes, it did protect people with disabilities. It had good intentions. However, like everything else, it went out of control when people started taking advantage of this. And businesses began to feel the weight of that. In these examples, a Florida art supply store was sued for toilet paper dispenser not placed at the correct height. A Colorado restaurant was sued for incorrect position of urinals in the men's restrooms, supposedly resulting in the restaurant's closure. I didn't check if the restaurant was closed or not. Maybe it was temporarily to change this. But anyway, a Georgia hotel sued for not having a swimming pool lift, even though the plaintiff had supposedly never even visited the hotel. This is unfair to the people who have disabilities and are trying to live their lives, as opposed to people who are taking advantage of this now. And they are suddenly becoming victims, and they can sue left and right. So, what happened? Ta-da! HR 620, also known as the ADA Education and Reform Act of 2017. The ADA Education and Reform Act was made to crack down on lawsuits like these, the ridiculous ones that are just targeting businesses. The legislation would require that any person claiming discrimination must first provide written notice allowing 60 days for an owner to acknowledge receipt of the complaint, plus an additional 120 days before legal action can be initiated. So unfortunately, where the ADA was meant to be a good thing, it was taken advantage of by some marshmallows, and now both sides suffer. I added Sutton versus United Airlines and Kentucky versus Williams because I found these two to be used against Kavanaugh to call him out on his supposed discrimination, but I urge you guys to read it. I'm not going to go through them. I was going to, but this is taking way too long. You can pause and read, or you can check out the whole thing on my sources page in the description box. I added this one as well because Kavanaugh was said to make a comment on this that didn't sit well with a lot of people. The guy in this lawsuit, James Adeyemi, was suing because he felt that he was discriminated against as a deaf person. I read through the whole thing and it is so detailed. They ripped this guy apart to make sure that he was discriminated against as he claimed. Because of Kavanaugh's statement, suddenly people are taking this out of proportion, but I don't think a lot of people bother to actually read this. So I left it on my sources page so that you guys can take the initiative and just read it for yourselves. And instead of going by what people are telling you in the media, you can see for yourselves what actually happened.
In addition to that, Kavanaugh also supports these school voucher programs. And for those of you who haven't looked into this, do your research, because school voucher programs specifically harm disabled children, because what they do is they waive their rights completely for disabled individuals, disabled students, to have access to a free and appropriate education.
How unfortunate for you again, because I did research this and you're not telling the whole truth. School vouchers don't harm disabled kids. Vouchers are regarding private schools. Private schools are private, so they can make whatever rules they want because they are private. But this also means that they may not have accessibility to disabled students. What does that mean? That means maybe someone who is very smart but is in a wheelchair may not have the ability to be able to go up a ramp at school because they don't have a ramp. But these private schools are not mean. I am positive that they will accommodate for such needs because I have seen private schools with ramps. However, because they are private schools and they do have their own set of rules and standards, students must go through an interview process, which means even if you are athletic and healthy and just the greatest and the most perfect, you may not get in because you do not qualify. Kind of like what Harvard does, or Yale, or any other Ivy League school. They are elite. So these private schools would technically be considered elite. They wear uniforms, they have badges, they have different school codes and conducts. But she's saying that this would hurt kids with disabilities. But what about the parents who want to send their kids to private schools? That's not fair for them. When there is something like private schools, when there are colleges and universities like the elite, like Yale and Harvard and Dartmouth and Brown, there are gonna be those who do not get to go in. This is reality. It's not like someone was doing it to be unfair and cackling like a witch in the process. These are just the options out there. Also, free and appropriate education, as you said, it comes from public schools because public schools are free to go to. I don't even know why you even mentioned that. School vouchers give parents the freedom to choose a private school for their children using all or part of the public funding set aside for their children's education. Under such a program, funds typically spent by a school district would be allocated to a participating family in the form of a voucher to pay partial or full tuition to their child's private school, including both religious and non-religious options. Private schools are extremely expensive. If a parent wants to send their children there, they could, but they need some help. But then in another sense, it is also unfair for them to continue paying their taxes to public schools to educate other kids. So it's not wrong for parents to want that help or choose to not pay to public school if their children are going to private school. Why pay for both if your kid's not going to public school? Having private schools and vouchers for these private schools is not harming anyone to the extent and mass hysteria that she is making it out to be. There are 34,576 private schools in the U.S., as opposed to 132,853 public schools in the U.S. Now, is this as serious as you're making it out to be? Concerning private schools, this article says if you choose to send your child to a private school, it's important to know that some schools are much better than others at helping students with learning and attention issues. For example, an independent school for students with learning disabilities is a private school that specializes in teaching kids with these issues. Other schools may not offer much support. They may not even admit students who struggle in certain areas. So there are also private schools for kids with disabilities, and these vouchers would hurt them, you say, Alyssa? So besides these private schools that exist specifically for disabled students with anything that they want or need, the public schools are well equipped and also have all access as well. These are 4 pros and cons I found about vouchers that I think need clarification. Pro 1, vouchers allow parents to choose their child's education, but con 1 says, tax dollars are intended for the better secular education of all children, not the private religious education of a few. But nobody said that all private schools are religious. Remember, there are non-religious private schools, and there are private schools for children with disabilities, specifically aimed for them. Pro 2, school vouchers improve education in general by making public schools compete with private schools for students in a free market. Con 2, School vouchers funnel money away from already struggling public schools and children and redistribute tax dollars to private schools and middle-class children. Look back at the two charts I just showed you, the number of public schools compared to the number of private schools. Apparently, the superintendent of Fort Wayne, Indiana schools, Wendy Robinson, is disgruntled because all the money is not coming into the private schools. She wants all the money, every single penny. But this takes away from the freedom of parents choosing private schools. They should have that choice. And if they would rather pay for their children to go to private school, why also pay for public school? This argument literally goes both ways. Pro 3, school vouchers allow school districts to overcome racial and other segregation. Con 3, school vouchers fail to accommodate and support disabled and special needs students. That's because, like I said, these are private schools. It's just like Harvard or Yale or other elite schools. You have to have an interview. They only take some students, not all. You can be the smartest in your grade in public school, but you will not be the smartest in this elite school. That doesn't mean that that's discrimination. They just have different standards. And there are private schools, again, specifically made for all disabled students. If you guys also do a quick Google search, you can find colleges specifically for deaf people, just like there are private schools for children with disabilities specifically for them. But people seem to forget that and overlook it. Pro 4, school vouchers offer students in failing schools access to a better education. Con 4, school vouchers do not improve students' academic performance. But if you read the rest of this, it's kind of biased because they only did a study based on very few schools, not all of them. Because in a lot of these private schools, these students excel.
So, yeah, guess that doesn't matter to you guys. LGBTQ plus community, let's keep going. Kavanaugh has avoided on several occasions, and specifically in 2006, avoided giving his definition of marriage. He's avoided saying anything about, if he considers gay marriage as something that should remain legal. Kavanaugh has also advocated, he's a strong advocate for religious freedom. Now, of course, everybody needs to be able to practice their religion in this country. We have religious freedom. However, as we all know, as we're accustomed with the right, that when the right and people like Kavanaugh say religious freedom, what they mean is they want religious freedom in the sense that it's now legal to discriminate against LGBTQ plus individuals, which, as we've seen time and time again, with instances like, the baker that wouldn't bake the cake.
First of all, take a breath. Second of all, this becomes an argument on both sides. If LGBTQ XYZ 1, 2, 3, Kappa, Delta, Pi, bloop, bloop is all-inclusive and tolerant, how come straight is not on there? And if you're saying that the bakers were wrong for refusing to bake that cake because of religious freedom, that means that the other two gay couple also were using their religious freedom to sue the people as well. And let's be real here, this isn't about religious freedom so much as it is the freedom to choose, because in this country we have the right to choose. The bakers chose not to make a cake because they felt that it wasn't right. And if you read the Bible, it says homosexuality is wrong, so they decided to just not make it. But then the two gay couple decided to sue them because they felt that it was wrong. So one side felt that it was wrong, but the other side felt that it was wrong. Both sides feel that something is wrong. What are we to do?
And not only that, but Kavanaugh also is hugely supported by the anti-LGBTQ plus hate group, the Family Research Council.
Careful now, Alyssa. Your bigotry is showing. The Family Research Council's definition of marriage and family, that family is the foundation of civilization, the seedbed of virtue, and the wellspring of society. Properly understood, families are formed only by ties of blood, marriage, or adoption, and marriage is a union of one man and one woman. So, Alyssa, these people believe in the marriage of one man and one woman, and that makes them a hate group, while LGBTQXYZ D1, 2, 3, 5, 10, Zeta, Kappa, blah, 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 exclude straight people and absolutely hate it and don't tolerate it when other people express their view that it's right for one man and one woman to get married. Throughout this video, you seem to preach tolerance, but suddenly someone has a different view and opinion, and suddenly you become the biggest bigot of them all. Alyssa, you should probably check your attitude at your car door.
Those are that group is one of his huge main supporters, and they are completely against LGBTQ plus individuals. They think that being gay is like unnatural.
Well, that's because the last time I checked, the only natural way of having children was with one man and one woman, and two women never seem to have children together, and two men never seem to have children together. So the natural way is not right, you're saying?
And all of that stuff, I mean, it's just completely barbaric, all of their views in regards to LGBTQ plus communities.
Barbaric, savagely cruel, exceedingly brutal. It just doesn't add up.
And people of color, let's talk about people of color. So I don't know if you guys know this, but Kavanaugh is against affirmative action, which, as we all know, affirmative action is something that we have put into place to get rid of discrimination against people of color in the workplace. He's against that. He's against affirmative action.
Affirmative action was put into place at a time in our history when blacks were being segregated from whites. President Kennedy was the first to use the term because people needed to take affirmative action to ensure that applicants were employed and that employees were treated during employment without regard to their race, color, or national origin. Affirmative action policies initially focused on improving opportunities for African Americans in employment and education. This was a time in history when it was desperately needed, so of course it made sense. Just like the BET was established because black people were not given the opportunity to appear on white award shows. But today that's not the case. Everyone is free to do anything, go anywhere. There is no more segregation. And just like there is no need for the BET, there's no need for affirmative action because black people are not discriminated against the way they were back in the 1950s, the 1960s, any time before our time. Affirmative action eventually extended to other minorities. And some people will continue to argue that there's still not enough black people or Asians who enroll in colleges or get jobs in certain places, but people forget that we do have a population, and in this population, no matter what anyone likes to think, there is still going to be a certain number of people that are white, that are Asian, that are Spanish speaking, that are black, that are Native American. Take a look at this. Now, I'm not talking about the entire world. I'm talking about just the United States. Whites make up 60% of the population. Look at blacks. They make up 13%. Asians make up about 5%. So if people want equal distribution in all fields, they're not going to get it. Not because of racism or discrimination, but because of population by nationality.
Kavanaugh is also for voter ID laws that are put specifically into place to target and purposely harm minority communities and lower their voting turnout. He's also against that.
Right, because his greatest desire is to make a spectacle of himself by targeting minorities on purpose. It has absolutely nothing to do with the laws of the land, like these voter identification requirements. A total of 35 states have laws requesting or requiring voters to show some form of identification at the polls. Here's the thing. Voting is a matter for U.S. citizens because it's their country. Anyone who's an immigrant, illegal, or not, and is not a citizen, why would you vote? Why would they even be allowed to vote? That should not even be an argument. What if I decided to go to Germany and stay there for like a week, but I wanted to vote in their elections? Would I be allowed? No, because I'm not a citizen. I don't partake in anything their country does. I am not a part of their country. It just makes no sense. So why is this even a debate? Why is this even a problem? If you are a U.S. citizen, you can vote. You have your ID, you've got all your documents, everything is fine and dandy. So why is it a problem? Why should anyone else outside of this country get involved in U.S. affairs? Or else, seriously, what is the point of being a U.S. citizen? If anyone can come in this country illegally, cheat their way in, steal some social security numbers, and do whatever they want, what is the point of being a citizen? Being a citizen means you have benefits. So then if everyone gets benefits in this world, then what's the point of being a U.S. citizen? The 15th Amendment says the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Look at it again. The right of citizens. Not immigrants, not illegal immigrants, not illegals, but citizens. Why is this even a topic for debate? So even if you are a minority in this country, but you are a citizen, what's the problem? You're a citizen. You have an ID, you have your documents. Does being a minority suddenly mean that you're not a citizen if you have every document and paper that you need, if you're legal, if you are a citizen?
And also, I'm sorry, he's for that. He's for voter ID laws. And women's rights. Oh my God, let's dig into women's rights, you guys. Because Kavanaugh has said that he wouldn't touch Roe versus Wade, right? Yeah, don't worry, leftists, he's not gonna touch Roe versus Wade. But yet, last year, just recently, in a key case that ordered that an undocumented 17-year-old individual, immigrant, have access to an abortion, he showed dissent in that ruling. And he showed dissent because he said that the government should favor fetal life and that the government should refrain from facilitating abortions. Really, huh?
Really, huh? I'm not going to cover this topic here because I'm going to make a whole separate video on abortion, and I guarantee you it will be graphic. Because you guys will never know how much these little ones suffer until you really see them suffer.
But he's not going to overturn Roe versus Wade or attempt to do so. Sure, let's also not forget that when we found out that Trump was going to have the chance to put one of his people on the Supreme Court, he said so many times and made it so clear that all of his nominees were going to be pro-life, and all of his nominees, he was going to be so proud because he was going to make sure his nominees were only people that would push an anti-choice and anti-woman agenda. Not to mention that, Kavanaugh is also against contraception coverage on healthcare, with healthcare. So he doesn't want to cover birth control, which again, if you are pro-life, one of the best ways to ensure and decrease abortion is to have access to birth control.
No, I think it's abstinence, and then taking responsibility afterwards anyway.
And I'm sorry, you guys, not everybody has, upwards of $50 or whatever a month to buy pills, or upwards on top of doctor's appointments, upwards of $2,000 without insurance to get an IUD. You guys don't even understand how expensive this is, okay? And the thing is it's like, no wonder all of the people who support Kavanaugh don't give a fuck about any of this, because you're all white, able-bodied males, and none of these things are going to affect you. But I guess, screw your daughters, screw your aunts, screw your sisters, screw your wives, screw your mom, forget everybody, and forget every minority, forget all of those people. Just, who cares? Who cares? Because you're good, right? Because you're good. But you know what? You're not good, because guess what else Kavanaugh supports? Guess what? He claims to believe in climate change, and he claims to believe that there's human stuff is contributing, like we're contributing to climate change. But yet it's Kavanaugh that sides with the Trump administration as they tear apart the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agencies, and all of its safety measures that are specifically in place to reduce this issue.
He's not there to tear everything apart and remove the EPA. He just wants Congress to be involved in decision making. I accidentally cut too much off, but it's all the way at the bottom. The EPA was established around the 1970s when people started getting concerned about air. President Nixon presented the House and Senate with a 37-point message on the environment. He also created a council in part to consider how to organize federal government programs designed to reduce pollution. Following the council's advice, the president sent to Congress a plan to consolidate many environmental responsibilities of the federal government under one agency, a new Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA would be able, in concert with the states, to set and enforce standards for air and water quality and for individual pollutants, so it can't act by itself, is what it's saying. And the EPA is also there as support to the states because the states can develop their own pollution control programs. The Clean Air Act is a law that defines the EPA's responsibilities for protecting and improving the nation's air quality. Kavanaugh doesn't want to do away with the EPA completely and dismantle it. He wants Congress to be a part of this climate problem and make decisions. And even if you don't agree with that, you can't say that he wants to completely dismantle the EPA because it's not true. I told you guys in my intro video, if you haven't watched it, just take a moment to watch it, that I take a biblical perspective on all matters in the world, and that includes climate change. This is the greenhouse effect. The sun is responsible in powering the Earth's climate by radiating energy and short wavelengths, but only 1/3 of the solar energy reaches the top of the Earth's atmosphere. The rest goes back to space. The rest is absorbed by the Earth's surface. But to balance this energy in the atmosphere, the Earth has to radiate the same amount of energy back to space. The sun is hot, the Earth is cold. So the energy that the sun gives is in short wavelengths, and because the earth is cold, the wavelengths will be longer. This energy that the earth gives is called thermal radiation. That's the heat that's emitted by land and ocean. The reason it's called a greenhouse effect is because the walls of a greenhouse keeps warm air inside. The temperature inside increases. This is an article from Masters University. And I just want to say that when you have a biblical perspective on something like climate change, you get to see how much people blow stuff out of proportion. And climate change is one of them. I do agree that humans have contributed in damaging a lot of the earth. It was given to us to take care of and be responsible for, but humans are not responsible for the entire damage of the earth solely. So it's not like anyone can say that we're 90% at fault. I don't think so. This is like 50-50 here. We did our part, but the earth did its part too. But anyway, there's biblical and scientific evidence that suggests that there was an ice age in recent past and the earth has been warming ever since. For instance, there were massive ice sheets covering most of the North American continent, and we have evidence that glaciers carved out large valleys. The usual discussions of global warming do not take these observations into account because the conventional belief in science is that the earth is very old, like billions and billions. For instance, the melting of glaciers in Montana's Glacier National Park is thought to be caused by current global warming, but a biblical view of Earth history suggests that this is due to the after effects of the ice age that resulted from Noah's flood. Further down it says, when all the causes of global warming are considered, it is controversial whether carbon dioxide has contributed significantly to the overall warming of the Earth. Interestingly, in a recent article in National Geographic, it was stated that more than 9 out of 10 climate scientists agree that carbon emissions contribute to global warming. Considering that there easily could be hundreds to thousands of climate scientists in the U.S. alone, this suggests that there are dozens or hundreds of climate scientists who disagree that carbon emissions contribute to global warming. Dr. Stephen Goldmer is a climate scientist with a PhD in atmospheric science. He is a creationist who's been keeping tabs on a global temperature and noticed that there were cycles of cooling and heating over the last 2 centuries. It says here he noticed a trend in the data suggesting that in each case the temperatures level off and a new equilibrium or balance is reached. But if you don't want a creationist point of view, here it is on climate.gov from a scientific point of view. Same chart. Take a look. The temperature has been compensating on and off, on and off. And to really make your veins bulge right now, both the Bible and science point to a beginning of the universe that includes the earth and heavens. Both the Bible and science agree that the current universe will come to an end involving heat. Science shows that the universe will end in heat death, and the Bible declares that the basic elements in the universe will melt away. Both the Bible and science reveal that man by nature is destructive, and his destructive nature needs to be controlled and corrected. After the flood, God promised Noah that he would never again destroy the earth by water, but he also promised that there would be stability in the earth by saying that the seasons would continue. And the seasons have been continuing. It says here in this article that people who are extreme in this topic want other people to believe that CO2 is the biggest factor contributing to global warming. But I looked into this as well as what this article is saying, that the primary greenhouse gas responsible for the vast majority of the greenhouse effect is actually water vapor. Carbon dioxide is the second most common greenhouse gas. This is not saying that we're completely innocent and not responsible for the effects of this, but it's not in the proportion that people seem to believe. This claim here says global warming will cause many animals and plants to go extinct. It says receding glaciers, melting ice caps, and other changes are likely to affect a variety of animal and plant species, but based on the fossil records, it appears that many species, like the mammoth, flourished in the changing climates after Noah's flood and eventually went extinct. Humans clearly had nothing to do with these climate changes and extinctions. There's a lot more detail on this website, but to summarize it, the Ice Age in a creationist point of view. Evidence suggests that the created world was warmer than the present world. In fact, the Earth probably did not have permanent ice until centuries after the flood. The polar ice we have today is likely a temporary indirect result of God's judgment against mankind's sin in the days of Noah. Only after the flood did conditions become right for the accumulation of permanent ice. The Earth cooled rapidly as a result of clouds of volcanic dust and phytoplankton blooms. Ironically, the warm oceans at the end of the flood were the engine that drove this rapid accumulation of snow. When the oceans cooled sufficiently, snow stopped piling up, but the pile was too thick to stand up under its own weight, so it surged out over the northern half of North America and Europe. Then rather quickly, the ice melted back to the present sheets in Greenland and Antarctica. Model calculations suggest that the buildup of ice in remote regions of eastern Canada and Antarctica may have taken a millennium at most. The surging of the ice and its rapid melting, which most people think of as the Ice Age, may have lasted only a few centuries. And in case anyone doesn't know, a millennium is 1,000 years. Another claim that global warming activists will make is that oceans will rise dramatically in the next century. In Al Gore's documentary, An Inconvenient Truth, he claims that an ice sheet will fall into the sea and will make the sea level rise by 20 feet, which will submerge the homes of 100 million people underwater, and this will happen in the next 50 years. So of course, if it looks all scientific and documentary-like, people will believe it, and it will raise panic, and it will make global warming activists of us. On top of that, StopGlobalWarming.org claims that the ocean level will rise only 6 feet, but there is no proof of that either to back up their claim. But, based on climate models, the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change estimates that ocean levels will rise approximately 16 inches during this century, which sounds more believable than 20 feet in 50 years. The next claim is global warming will cause an increasing number of weather catastrophes. So far, it's been blamed for our floods and hurricanes and tornadoes and other extreme weather. This continues to say that extreme weather has never been something out of the ordinary, and that scientists use satellites to keep track of all of this. Though there absolutely is evidence that there have been an increase in hurricanes, a study in the Journal of Nature Geoscience concludes that global warming itself is not the cause of hurricanes. And for those of you who are swearing at me right now for believing in a biblical view on global warming and climate change, here's a non-creationist view. Paleontologist Doug Irwin was questioned about this matter. He is one of the world's experts on the end Permian mass extinction, a volcano that nearly ended all life on Earth 252 million years ago. Remember, this is not a creationist point of view. People believe if we keep going like this the way we do and our climate changing the way that people are saying it's changing, then we're headed for another extinction. When he was asked about this, he said no, he thinks it's junk science. He said many of those making comparisons between the current situation and past mass extinctions don't have a clue about the difference in the nature of the data, much less know how truly awful the mass extinctions recorded in the marine fossil record actually were. He said he doesn't claim that people are not contributing to some of the damage today, but scientists are not being very accurate with what they're saying to the people. And I added these facts for all you global warming activists to really set your teeth on edge. Global temperature changes from the past millennia, according to available data, were often severe and rapid long before man supposedly had any impact at all. Recent recorded history mentions times of noticeable global warming and cooling long before man had any ability to produce industrial emissions. This is before the Industrial Revolution, which was in the 1900s. So what was the excuse in the 1800s? They didn't have the things they had in the 1900s and now. Water vapor, not CO2, is the most influential greenhouse gas. Most of the global temperature increase of the last 100 years occurred before most of the man-made CO2 was produced. You guys can keep reading this for yourselves, if you want.
Yeah, sure. So there you go. So yeah, again, if you guys support Kavanaugh, you do not support liberty and justice for all. And that's it. That's the final facts. That's the truth.
Yeah, sure. So there you go. So yeah, again, that's not the whole truth. There was a ton more I wanted to add to this video, but I'm already at my max limit here with my minutes, and I went overboard again. Sorry about that. Subscribe if you like, check out my other videos, and share.
Educate yourself!